Okay, perfect. Today we have David and Julie Bullitt joining us. Julie Bullitt is a family therapist and David Bullitt, a divorce lawyer. They've been married for 36 years. Julie and David have been witness to families struggling with life's most difficult challenges, while at the same time weathering many of their own, such as one child's mental health and behavioral issues, personal loss, and financial struggles. The Bullitts are corporate speakers, relationship coaches, and authors of the award-winning book, The 5 Core Conversations for Couples. Yay, it's a fun, great book. And today our conversation is going to focus on the second core conversation of money. Money, 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 as it's titled in the book, right? So to begin with, I'm interested in how you both chose your careers.
You
We'll
first.
start.
Yeah,
Okay.
so actually mine is sort of a funny story.
Okay.
I was not the best student in high school and I barely made it into college, and I was in going, I guess, at orientation at University of Maryland, and I met with an advisor and they were like, well, what do you want to study? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really great at school. So the advisor said, well, do you like science? And I'm like, no, I'm not really good at science. How about math? No, I'm not really good at math. How about English? I'm like, no, that doesn't really interest me either. How about family studies? And I said, oh, I have a family and they're pretty interesting. So, okay, sign me up. So I became a family studies major at University of Maryland, which led me to want to be a family therapist. And that's how it evolved.
Okay, so did you do some school, like, did you get your degree? Because I know you're a stay-at-home mom for a while and
Yep.
then pick it up again afterwards, or?
No, I went straight through. So I went to undergraduate, University of Maryland, did family studies major, and then I went right to social work school, clinical social work.
Okay.
And I've been, practicing for 30 something years. I took short little breaks to, be home with the kids here and there, but I always worked 1 or 2 nights a week.
Okay.
Come home and then I would run out and go see a few clients because I always wanted to keep my toe in the water. So to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, very good. Okay. How about you, David?
Yeah, so mine is not nearly as interesting. I came from a family, there was not a lot of professionals in the family. So my grandfather and my father, they wanted me to be a professional. And since I passed out at the sight of blood, medical doctoring was out. I didn't much for feet, no podiatrist. My teeth are fine, but I didn't see myself as a dentist. So law school it was. And so I went to law school, and I actually was in Chicago for about 1.5 years, came back as Julie and I had met my senior year and her freshman year at Maryland, came back locally here in Baltimore. And from there, I just took the best job I could get. And it happened to be with a firm that did family law work. And in those days, unlike today, in those days, it gave you a lot of experience doing trial work. So it was great for me. The story I tell, which is true, is the day that I was sworn in the morning, in the afternoon, I was in the courtroom trying to have a short little trial type thing. So that's the short story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. Nothing like jumping right in, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So do you guys refer to each other, or is that like the conflict of interest? Not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally a conflict of interest.
Yeah, okay.
There's, we certainly use each other as resources. Once or twice a week, I'll get an email or a text or a shout across the room. Hey, I need a therapist in, for kid or Bethesda, wherever.
Gotcha.
And then vice versa, I'll say, I have a couple that I'm working with, or a woman or a man that I'm working with, and they are going to be going their separate ways. Who should I refer to? And he'll give me a name of people, but yeah, we can't really refer to each other because it is a conflict of interest.
Okay, got it. Okay, very good. Well, what I loved right off the bat in your book, you talk about the idea of lubricating the relationship, right? And it reminded me of the saying, if you wait until you're thirsty to take a drink, it's too late. You're already dehydrated, right? So same kind of thing, it's a maintenance kind of thing, not just a one and done, right? So from what I gather from your book and your work, many couples you see are not lubricating the financial part of their relationship, right? So what percentage of couples would you say that you see bring up money as a source of conflict?
Well, first of all, you're 100% right. And
Mhm.
President Kennedy, I think, said 60-ish or so years ago, the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. It's not
Mhm.
when it's pouring rain that you want to send somebody up and fix the roof. And it's the same thing when it comes to talking about money in a relationship. Uh, in my office, over 36 years, I can tell you without hesitation that money is one of the top 2 or 3 issues that causes conflict in a relationship. And I see it almost in almost everyone who comes in, there's some financial
Mhm.
component
Mhm.
to why they're talking to a divorce lawyer. So I don't want to say
Wow.
100%, but
Yeah.
it's
It's up
frequent and
there. Yeah.
regular, persistent.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, and people that come into my office often are not talking about money, and I
Mm.
have to do some digging. So a lot of times people will come in, we're not getting along, we're fighting, he does this, he does that, whatever, she does this, she does that. And then money sometimes is one of those subjects that people, I always say money and sex are really two very difficult things to talk about. People will talk about communications often, we'll talk about feelings of hurt or pain, but money and sex are really tricky.
Hmm.
So lots of times it's an issue, but it's not talked about.
Mhm. For sure. And why do you think that is? Like, we give money so much power, right? It's either
Yeah.
fun to spend or it's considered evil. We equate it with success or we equate it with stress. Like, I even knew a guy who, this couple, when they purchased and closed on their first home, he was up that first night all night vomiting over how ill he felt, over how much money he had just committed to pay for the next 30 years on this house. So
Mhm.
what is it, uh psychologically, or something that behind our tendency to give money so much power over us?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, I always say that everybody comes to having a different definition of what money means to them. So for
Mhm.
some people, money means, safety, like having some money means that they're not going to be, on the street, or they're going to always be able to be taken care of. And then for other people, spending money is the way that they feel they should use money. So you can have two extremes of somebody that really wants to save money and feel safe, and then somebody that just wants to have fun, right? Like
Right.
YOLO, you only live once, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, just go out and spend it.
Well, I mean, people come from different places, right? I mean, I don't know your spouse, obviously, but a lot of us have grew up differently,
Mhm.
So I I may have grown up without not having a lot, moving from place to place, and if I had a brand new pair of sneakers, that was the greatest thing in the world. But my significant other might have had 8 pairs of sneakers because when it got dirty, she got a new pair. And so it's easy to say, okay, well, those are no good, so I'm getting a new one. And I say, well, hold on a second, or I don't say anything, which is often the problem.
Right.
Or I say,
Right.
wait a minute, what's wrong with those? I can clean them up, and
Yeah.
so backgrounds, right, and
Right.
how you grew up, observing your own family and what
Yeah.
you lived in, I think has a lot to do with it. And the problem, I think, when it comes to money, very simply, is that oftentimes people don't think about it together. They might think about it
Mhm.
separately, but they don't sit down and say, okay, it's going to be 2023 in a month. What do we want to do this year? What do we have? What do we think we're going to earn? What would we like to save? And let's try to put sort of a plan together and think about it and talk about it and get on the same page. Because when you're not on the same page, builds resentment oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Jealousies, oh, you just bought a new pair, new this, or I'm going to get me that kind of. We talk
Mhm.
about that in our book a little bit in this balance of power chapter. But it creates a lot of conflict if you
Mhm.
don't talk about it. So why not talk about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is sometimes in relationships, one person will really be in charge of the money, which
Mhm.
whether they're the ones earning it or not, but that can get very, difficult, because sometimes people, that are managing the household, managing the bills, aren't discussing with the other person, like, hey, you know what, like, we're short here, or we're overspending, or we have excess, what should we do with it? That would be a great scenario.
Right.
So, but very often, and David sees this a lot with, people that are coming in and getting divorced that really have no idea of their financial situation.
Yeah.
And that is really, it's easy to kind of let someone else do it,
Yeah.
but it's dangerous and it's not a good situation.
No, we talk a lot about things that we think are good for all relationships, right? Generally speaking, and everybody's, but you have to remember, everyone's relationship is their own, and what might work in mine might not work in yours, or Joe's, or Tom's, or Mary's,
Absolutely.
or whoever else's. But
Right.
the idea that someone who's a partner in a relationship, who's building a family and building a home and building a life, has no idea about how we're getting there or going there is
Or if we're not going there.
or
Yeah.
hoping to get there is I think oftentimes a recipe for an awful lot of conflict and an awful lot of business in my office.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you even begin to counsel a couple in order to help them get on a healthier path
Yeah.
of financial?
Well, and I think that's a great question. So I think that when we talk about, we talk about the 3 C's a lot, which are communication, connection, and consistency. So
Okay.
if you kind of apply the 3 C's to a discussion about finances, is, talking about it, trying to use, I statements and not be blaming anybody, and really, connecting often over it. So one of the things that David and I do, we've been doing this for about 10 years now.
It's really annoying at
It's
first,
really
so maybe
annoying,
do-
but on our anniversary, which is in August 9th, we actually sit down, we have a journal that we write goals in every year. And one of the goals is always a financial goal. And it could be keep on doing what we're doing. Most of the time it's, spend less, save more. Sometimes we have, aspirations on there to do things like, if we want to give to a certain charity, or we want to, buy a boat, which we don't want to do, but I'm giving you an example.
Right.
So we write down goals, and we often have intimacy goals, and we often have financial goals on there. And one of the things that can be very helpful is, if you think of your relationship and your financial situation as like a business, how do you want to run it? So you have to establish some goals, of how you're going to do that. And then working together gives you power, because two heads are better than one, right? And working on how you're going to get there. So,
and we talk about this a lot when we go out and talk to people. Successful businesses, 99 out of 100 have a plan. What's our plan? How are we going to work that plan? Those that don't have a plan usually fail. So why not do the same thing that you would do in business here at home? Why not build a plan?
Yeah, it seems so obvious, but
it does.
Yeah,
it
not
does.
always.
But you know what happens? What happens is that things get in the way. Jobs get in the way. Time gets in the way. Kids get in the way. Other stresses get in the way, and you lose track. And when we talk about the consistency, and that's Julie mentioned the 3 C's, that coming back. Okay, we got to get back. It's the second Sunday of the month. Let's go back to our book and our journal, our notebook, our list. Let's see how we're doing. Even if it's for 10 minutes, but try to stay on track. What's that? Now, sometimes, the plan might change for whatever reason. My grandfather had a stroke, and now he's going to have to live with us okay, well, that may affect our ability to go to the mountains for 2 weeks, or whatever the case may be. But having that plan and being on the same page and consistently applying it, I think, is good.
Yeah. And the communication. My anniversary is September 9th. So that's
awesome.
Nice.
And one thing that was going on with us for years when our kids were little was I was managing all the money, balancing the checkbook and paying all the bills. So then what happened when things went off and we were maybe a little short, it was my fault, right? That's how I was taking it, because I was the one supposed to be managing all of that. And then something misfired. And so I blamed myself. So finally, after years of I wish he would help me. I wish, I wasn't all on me. I finally was like, why don't you just ask him, can we do this together, rather than it, because this is what I'm feeling. And he was like, oh, I don't blame you at all. Right. But I was perceiving it that way. And so when I just finally spoke up and said, hey, can we do this together? it became so much easier. And like you were saying, two heads are better than one. So he could see things differently than I did. And yeah, then we had a plan. And even now, so we try to meet on Monday nights and, make plans for what's coming up to spend and what we owe and so on.
Yeah, that's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
even when we miss, we'll be like, hey, we don't have time this week, but we know we're on track, right? We just kind of do this
Yeah,
quick
great.
little, yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
terrific.
that's great.
yeah, just having a plan, like you were saying, is you have to know where you're going, right? And so sometimes we just feel like, oh, it'll just happen. Like the things we want will just happen, but without a plan, they're not going to just happen, right?
Yeah.
It's important that people, I think, not hold it in and not because let's see, let's take an example, right? I'm the one who takes care of paying the bills in our relationship, let's say, which I don't actually, she does, but I'm paying the bills and I'm looking and saying, what's going on with the spending? But I don't say anything about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then I look at the next month and there we go again. And I don't say anything about it because I want to avoid conflict. I don't want to stress her out, or I don't want to get into a fight, or what's going to be her reaction. Okay, and then another month goes by, and then
Yeah.
and then what happens is, and we call it in the book, don't bank the bitching, right? Let's not put that in there. Let's just get out there on the lobby and let's talk about it.
Yep.
Let's talk about it. And if you're upset, say you're upset, why you're upset, what you're concerned about. And as Julie likes to say, it's not necessarily what you say, but it's how you say it. So you can convey your concerns and your upset without starting World War III.
Yeah,
Right.
without blaming. Because
Right.
if you have financial issues, it's not one person's fault.
Right. Right.
It's not.
Very-
You're a couple, and
Right.
I was working with this couple that the man took care of all the bills. He was mostly the breadwinner. She worked, but she put her paycheck in the mix. And the next thing they knew is they couldn't afford to stay in the house, and they had a big tax bill. And she said, I had no idea. I had no idea what was going on and whatever. And I said, hey, listen, you had a part in this. Like,
Right.
you may not have been told, you may not have had all the information, but you chose not to dig and not to ask. And so she had to, fess up with the fact that, like, burying her head in the sand and not knowing was really on her.
Part of the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a problem in their relationship. And you know what? Thank goodness they worked it out. And they are still together, and it's great. And David and I have had our own financial issues. In the book, we talk about fun till reality takes the T-bird away, right?
Yes.
So I got this
crying about that.
Still crying because I got this gorgeous mint green T-bird for my 40th birthday. And we were living the life, it was like my second car. We were keeping up with the Joneses. It was great. He never said no to anything I wanted to do. And I didn't really say no to him either. And we sort of working in this like
fantasy land is what we would call it.
But it was a lot of fun, actually. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun until it wasn't.
Right. And then what hit the fan, and we were having trouble paying our bills. And like literally, I was using those checks that would come from the credit cards that you would be able to like flip money over. And that's how I was paying mortgages and kind of just paying one and then, not paying the other. And it was hard. We had 4 kids and we were in a really, nice neighborhood trying to like do what everybody else was doing. And we went on what we call the debt diet. And we had to really, like shake things up and clip coupons. And we did a vacation to Florida where we drove with 4 kids down to Florida, which is about 15 hours from where we live. And we stayed in the $1 a night resort
for the whole week.
Because the timeshare, we had to take a tour.
You had to listen to the presentation.
Yeah. So we said to the kids, hey, we can go down, we can get this basic free vacation, but mom and dad are going to have to go for like 2 hours and, listen to this thing. So we did that, but we dug in, we communicated, we set goals.
We sold things.
We sold a lot of things, and we didn't do a lot of things. And, we were not eating out anymore. And our neighbors would sort of like laugh at us, but would say, no, we can't do that. We're on a debt diet. And we were like upfront about it with people and family. And we got through it. And luckily we both have professions that we can work in, and we had
Right.
jobs. So we got ourselves out of it.
Yeah, we put, I mean, there just came a time where we just said, okay, that's,
Yeah.
it. We got to figure this out. This is no way to live our lives,
Yep.
and we're going to fix it. And so we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
again, but we were on the same page. The problem that you see is when one person sees the storm that's either coming or already there, and the other person doesn't, has no
Right.
idea. And some of this, Meredith, probably this in your practice, some of this is generational, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
the generation older than us, or maybe 2 generations up, but people that are still married and alive and living their lives, oftentimes there was one spouse, usually in those cases, it was the wife who just didn't know, who wasn't told.
Well,
It
yeah.
was that was the norm.
I remember
And-
telling my husband when we got married, because I knew his dad kind of gave his mom an allowance every
Mhm.
week.
Yeah.
And I was like, not happening. I just want you to know that my name is going to be on the checking account, because I knew several women that their names were not even on the checking
Yeah.
account.
And I have people that that have asked us questions about, like, is it okay if someone has like their own bank account or their own money?
Mm.
And the answer is, it's fine if you guys talk about it and you know about it. So I've always had some kind of business, and I always keep just a little bit of money, because if I wanted to buy a gift for
Yeah.
David, I didn't want it to come. I
That's
wanted
why
it
you
to
do
be
it, just so you can buy
be
gifts for them.
obvious.
Yeah, and also I didn't want to have to like tell him or ask him permission if I wanted to get something. Now, that doesn't mean I hide things. Like, I will
Right.
come clean. I will tell him, like, hey, you know what, I did this or I did that or whatever. But there's no right or wrong, but it's more about honesty, and it's
Yeah.
more about being on the same page.
Well, that's one thing I think you guys really do beautifully in the book. Each chapter, each section, there's kind of like this struggle that you went through. There's
Yeah.
even shows how you banter back and forth a little bit over it, right? And then it shows how you work through it, or when you've told a story maybe about a client. And I just think that's a perfect example, a perfect way to show how to work through and how to have a hard conversation. David, you mentioned earlier the balance of power. Can you explain that a little more?
Sure. So what you see happen, and frankly, I think it happened some in our relationship earlier on when we had less time, when we were stressed with kids. So the joke I always tell, to lead into this is, Julie was home with the children primarily, and those were the days before there was no Zoom, there was no pre-recording podcast, there was none of that. I was going to the office, and that's where I had to work. So it would be leaving at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, getting back 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And so she was home a lot with the kids. I didn't really see that as a big issue, because I was the one I had to fight traffic. I had to get here, get there. So I would go and get a haircut, right? And it would she would get so mad that I could go
Yeah.
get a haircut.
Yeah.
And so
He would just schedule a haircut,
said,
go
"No,
whenever
I'm
he
gonna go
wanted.
Tuesday at
If I
5."
wanted a haircut,
Oh, I've been there.
I
Yeah.
had to get a babysitter, beg
Oh,
my
yeah.
mom, my mother-in-law, anybody, can
Oh,
you
yeah.
come home early, which was no,
But what
yeah.
you see, and what you see is sometimes in relationships, when people are bumping heads when it comes to money, is yeah, I'm playing golf on Sunday, and it's $160.
Mhm.
And she looks at me and says, okay, fine, go play golf. And then when I turn her head, then she's on the internet and spends $260 on X. And then I see the bills. You spent $260 on whatever. You didn't really need that. Well, you spent 160 on golf. Well, that's 160. You spent 260. So now I go on,
Yeah.
and it sounds
Right,
petty, but I'm telling you, it happens. You see that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like a bad tennis match, right? The
Mm.
people just banging the ball back and
Mhm.
forth, and with no end in sight,
Yep.
because it's just, they're mad. And if you took the time to not be mad and say, okay, we have a disagreement here, let's see how we can bridge
Yeah.
it. Then all of a sudden, instead of spending 100, maybe I'll go hit balls for $20, and you'll do this for 20, and we work our way through it. But it takes work.
It does.
You know that, Meredith. I'm not sure. How long have you been married?
It'll be 30 years in September.
Okay,
all
yeah,
right.
that's a good long
Well,
time.
Well, I like
Yeah.
to say we've been married, it'll be 36 in August, and I like to
Yeah.
say it's 19 of the best years of my life. It's a big joke. It's not true, because it has been great, but it's work, I mean, it's work. Not every day is
Yeah.
terrific. Not every moment is awesome.
Yep.
It takes work,
Yep,
but
does.
but if you're willing to put the work in, and you both are, then you can make it work. And it
Absolutely.
works for you. What work, like I said, what works for me, people always say, well, whatever, should I do this? Or, we say, hold on a second. You don't necessarily listen to what we have to say.
Mm.
We have some ideas that you could think about whether they would work, but they might not work for you. I mean, and relationships are different when it comes to money, it comes to how people parent their, sexual lives and so forth. So.
Yeah, it really comes down to the meaning that you're making of what's going on, what your husband said to you or spent, or what he's doing. Like, what are you making all of that mean? Are you taking it personally? Are you, making it mean that they're selfish or they're greedy, or, and when you uncover all that and you're willing to really look at it, then it kind of takes the drama away, if you're able to look at it
Right.
more
Yeah.
factually.
Yeah. And
So-
I
Go
I
ahead.
talk a lot about perspective taking and really
Mhm.
being able to take the other person's perspective. If you can do that, then you can make most things work.
Yeah, absolutely. So what financial lessons are you grateful for now because of what you learned the hard way, like maybe with your T-Bird, right? And
Mhm.
because of the way you worked through it together, like, can you share some examples of how those financial conversations led you to greater connection between the two of you because you came together? And maybe it's the T-Bird example, or maybe there's another one.
Well, I think that the bottom line that I learned that I personally learned is it didn't really matter if I was driving a T-Bird or a Hyundai Elantra, or, I was just as happy and the same person. Whether I live in, a big house with fancy things, or I live in a more modest. In fact, I think I'm a more happy person knowing that I can afford the way that I'm living.
Absolutely.
And that stress of always owing and worrying about where you're going to get your, how you're going to pay your next bill, that's a big weight on your shoulders.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that, what I learned, or especially during that period of time, is that you don't really need to do anything to have a good time.
Mm.
Frankly, and we still do, some of the best nights that we have, where it's just the
Mhm.
two of us, might be watching a show together that we're streaming over a few nights, or sitting on our porch and just hanging out, me putting the music up too loud, her telling me
Yeah.
to turn it down,
Yep.
and just sort of hanging out and talk and laughing most of the time.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that came out of our financial struggles was, frankly, and the lesson I learned was, I never had to be there to begin with, because I didn't need to do those things. I didn't need to have those things.
Mhm.
We need to go these places. I was very happy, and now almost too happy, because she was trying to get me to do more stuff. And I'm going, no, let's sit on the porch tonight, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's kind of what I learned mostly from, and like I said, that still lives in our life today.
Yeah. And the other thing that really, comes right through with that situation is that we work together really well.
Yeah.
Like, we can dig in,
Yeah.
we can take something that's really not easy and we can make it work. And we know that about, ourselves as a couple.
I mean, people look
Yeah.
at us and say, how did you possibly write a book together? You write a book together, you do these speaking things, you spend so much time, you both work from home a lot. How do you I would go crazy. And I'm like, it seems like second nature to me.
Yeah.
And again, that's not to say we don't have our bumps, because we
Right.
definitely do.
Yeah.
And we don't usually have big blow ups, but we have times when we're sort of looking at each other with our eyes squinting and saying, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mostly say, oh my God, he's so annoying.
Yeah, she does say that. Yeah, she does that, or she just doesn't respond when you talk to
I'm
her.
like, oh my God, he's so
Her
annoying.
head's
whatever.
at her computer, or
Yeah,
book, or whatever it might be.
but you know what? When you go through hard things, this because of the work that you do and the life that you've had. When you go through hard things, have hard conversations, have hard moments, it truly makes you more connected.
Truly.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we've touched on this a little bit, but I think it's good to reiterate it, right? In a marriage or committed relationship, you still are an individual, right? But what is required for each individual to be willing to work through to make a difference in their relationship?
Yeah. So I like to talk about the sports analogy where you always hear the coach, there's no I in team. There's no,
Ah,
well, yeah, but there kind of should be,
yeah.
right? When you talk about a relationship, yeah, we're a team, but we think, and again, this does fall into the category of what works here may not work there. We think that maintaining your own, not necessarily separate life, but maintaining your own piece of doing things on your own is important. And we have always done that from early on, whether it be, I've been playing cards with the same group of friends since I was in high school, and we still play once a month. We get together and we go on a trip once a year for a long weekend.
Awesome.
And Julie sees her friends and goes out with her friends. And I think it's been a good thing for us. There's nothing wrong with doing things separately. Now,
Yeah.
I will tell you, right, that there are some people that look at me like I'm from another planet when I tell them that. And I have a friend who a few years ago, we planned a weekend, an overnight here in Bethany Beach, where Julie stayed in Maryland, and I was here with my friends we were going to watch this movie that was coming out. We're looking forward to watch it. We're going to get together, my family, and watch it. And this one guy had never been away from his wife, been married for 25 years, or they never had been and he had no idea how to walk, how to act, what to say, where to go.
Yeah.
But you know what?
But
they're happy.
They're
and that's what
married
works
and
for
happy.
them.
Yeah.
For us, and I think for a lot of people, having going out to dinner with your girlfriends or with your work friends or with whomever there's nothing wrong with that. And it shouldn't raise, why are you doing that? Or why don't you want me to come? Or it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with me just wanting to do my own thing a little bit.
Yeah.
And we are big proponents of that for people who are open to it. Some people say, no, we don't like that. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it works for them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, at the end of each core conversation chapter, you have some Kickstarter questions, which you have included as a PDF download for our listeners. But I wanted to bring up one of the questions, which was, let's see, it's just encouraging conversation between the couple, right? So the question is, were the two of you raised differently when it comes to money? Do the differences in upbringing affect your spending habits, and have those differences affected your relationship? So why did you include these questions? Why is it important to know the answers to them?
Well, because I think it really affects how you think about money and how you were raised, in terms of, that. I think it's really important to think about it, because your actions around money are going to come out with, how you were raised. So again, if your family didn't have a lot and they needed, to have money in the bank to feel safe, and the other person never felt that, you're not going to understand that.
Think about it. If you have this discussion early in your relationship, you and I are engaged and we're getting ready to get married, and we sit down, we look at this question, say, okay, well, what's the answer? I lived in a little rental apartment and did this or that, whatever the case may be. And you say, oh gosh, that's, where I was raised, I was in the here and there. And so, well, then that should, in anybody with any inquisitive nature at all, should then raise a couple other questions. Well, how are we going to work that out? Is that going to be a problem for us? And identifying that it's there, right, is 3/4 of the battle.
Yep.
So that's why it's in there. And we think it's important that people are mindful of that, because it's nobody's fault because I feel one way and you feel a different way. It's oftentimes, like we said, it's environmental and how you were raised societally with, wherever you were, maybe I was raised in West Virginia and you were raised in Manhattan, it's, who knows? So, but that's an important thing. And people just sort of scurry past that because,
it's interesting because, sometimes when you meet people that maybe come from two different religions. People will say like, oh, what are you, if you have kids, how are you going to raise the kids? People will ask about those differences, but people never say like, oh, you know what, you were raised in a wealthy family and he was
Yeah.
raised kind of like, just paycheck to paycheck. How are you going to deal with that? Like nobody ever says that, right?
No, right.
But we should,
Well,
right?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons I love these questions is because in the work I do, I teach people you can let go of those. Like if you grew up believing that money was tight and money is hard and money is, evil, so to speak, is that working for you? Because you don't have to keep believing that. It's kind of like, this dress doesn't fit me anymore. I'm gonna give it away and donate it to somebody. We don't have to hold on to these beliefs that we've been taught years ago and that really aren't working for us anymore. And the goal really doesn't have to be 100% agreement, like both sides see things the exact same way. That doesn't really have to be the goal. And I think you've shown that well too in this chapter, is that like the story with the newspaper, right? I love the newspaper. I've had it for years, and you're like, but you aren't reading it, right? And so, but still be able to come to an agreement on it. I just think they're really,
you still get the newspaper,
and I do read it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand why we spend $12 a year on the newspaper, but that's a month, whatever.
I love it. Do you have some success stories of couples who did the work to change their money mindset and maybe, could share how they did that? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was thinking about a couple that I was working with that the woman grew up in a very conservative family where money was tight. She had a single mom who was a teacher, and it was just her and her kids. And so they didn't do a lot of vacationing. They didn't do a lot of extra things, but they had a nice life. And then her husband grew up, in a more affluent family, and she was more in control of the money, and she was, investing it and trying to save for the family. And anytime he wanted to do something like get a new car or, think about buying something, she would put up an argument, a fight. She would be like, we don't need to do that. We need to save money and whatever. And so part of why they came to see me was because they were fighting all the time about that and other things. So we really did a lot of work around, what does money mean to you? What does money mean to you? And how can we bridge that? Can you now understand that when you want to spend money, that scares her? And can you understand that when you try to restrict him spending money, he feels like it, restricted and controlled.
Yeah.
So they really had to work through it. And they actually developed some really good communication around, around spending money and purchases. And she was able, he kind of went through and showed her like, we can afford to do this, or we can afford to do that. But it took a lot of discussions, right? And, but they really worked beautifully on, changing their dynamics around money. And that was one of the, couples that I can just, sort of sticks out for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you have anything to add, David?
By the time they get to me, there's
it's done.
Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, they're done.
No success stories that I could think of other than ours.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely awesome. I think you have given so much helpful advice to listeners. Can you tell us, where to find you guys, how to find your book, where, all the things?
Love to. Well, our website is www.thebullets.com. We're at The Bullets on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and have I missed anything? LinkedIn.
Yep. And this is our book, The 5 Core Conversations for Couples. And
it's actually available at probably maybe still some local bookstores where you are in Utah, all local bookstores across the country, online on all major retailers, in both paperback, in electronic version, Kindle, or whatever you use, a reader. And what was the most fun for us, the audiobook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
that's how
having
I've been
two-
listening to the
Yeah, having
audio.
two
But yeah.
people, actors that are doing our parts was quite an interesting.
It was
listen.
interesting to listen to your own book.
Yeah, yeah. And we have we're pretty active on social media. We have our own YouTube channel that we post some videos. and
Oh, wow.
things about.
Mhm.
Again, that's The Bullets on YouTube. So if you have any questions or
Comments?
or
Yeah.
have thoughts for us that you'd like us to talk about, Meredith, we get on, we do these every so often, these things called couples cocktails, where we sit on Facebook and we just talk about whatever the issue that might come up. So if anybody wants any information, wants to chit chat, just shoot us a note.
Yeah.
And we're contact@thebullets, right?
Yeah.
@thebullets.
Yep. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much.
you're
Thank you for all the good
think you've
work you're
helped a lot.
doing and having us.
Yeah.
It's been
Thank you so
awesome.
much for having us, and
Absolutely.
keep on working with people and leading them to hard conversations.
That's right.
That's my goal. Thank you so much.
Right,
You're
you bet.
welcome.